So one last thing before we turn it over to Cheryl, because we have a full program ahead of us tonight. So Startup Happy Hour would not be held possible without the support from Startup Sack's founder, Startup Sack's sponsors, who you can see on the screen there: Witten Law, SMUD, Bender Insurance, Nivagen, Stoll Reeves, Weintraub Tobin, Ernst & Young, Clifton Larson Allen, and Modetta Ventures. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and let's spotlight Cheryl and give control.
I think we're going to move to the next portion of our program now. Jeff, we're going to move to the
so I'm going to remove spotlights from most people. I'm going to keep Anna on because she's part of the next one. So takes me just a second.
Thank you, Amy and Sarah.
And I need to add. So I think I've got Kate, so I think we're good to go.
Okay, well, welcome Anna, Kate, and Fatma. So great to have you here. These are women who have all successfully been funded, and we're so excited to hear their stories tonight and to meet them. As we said, or I think Nancy said earlier, at FourthWave, we like to envision a world where 50% of the venture funding goes to women entrepreneurs. And these women represent those who are starting to make that a reality. And we're going to see thousands and thousands more coming behind them that they're setting the pace for. So tonight, what we'd like to do is hear from them and their stories, their learnings. And let's start with Kate. You look Hi. Really comfortable there outside where it's cool, and welcome to our panel tonight. We would first really just like to hear a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your origin story and how you started your company, and we'll get into funding later. We just want to first get to know you a little bit.
Okay, thank you. I assume you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so very nice to meet you all. My story is that I actually didn't mean to start a business. I kind of accidentally started a business, but it was a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't something I tripped into, but I was trying to solve a problem more than I was trying to start a business. I have actually ran a consulting business here in Sacramento for the last 10 years, consulting to unify information to better serve folks who receive mental health, behavioral health, and child welfare care. And was working as a consultant to build technology to unify information for foster youth, did projects in San Francisco and around the state, also nationally as well. And I work for the University of Chicago, Chapin Hall, and am now at the University of Kentucky. My background is that I actually started out at the lab bench doing research, cell and molecular biology, looking for new drugs to treat mental illness, but moved into robotics and data and AI in the 1990s. So early AI adopter, got my master's in statistics and my Ph.D. in social welfare to give that social lens to mental and behavioral health. And so through that work as a consultant, trying to solve that problem and build technology one at a time, it became apparent that we needed more of an enterprise solution. And so had this vision of what we needed and pitched it initially to like California state agencies to build because it was what we needed, and actually got a bite from one of the agencies that was going to fund the project. It was going to be open source. And I was completely fine with that because I was solving a problem. But it just turns out that nobody really understands your vision but you. And if it didn't work out with having somebody else kind of take hold of that vision because they just didn't build ultimately the solution, the enterprise solution that that I had wanted them to build. And so, in fact, you know, I realized at one point the only way this problem was going to get solved is if I did start a business and do it myself. And so I guess, you know, put on my boots and got them on the ground and said, you know what, if I'm going to solve this problem, I've got to build a business. And that's kind of my story of how I started Opeeka. And so we built our MVP and launched it last December. And it is an enterprise software solution that unifies care for mental health, behavioral health, child welfare, as well as applies artificial intelligence to identify trajectories of recovery and resilience to figure out what interventions are working best or what treatments are working best for whom.
Wow, that is an amazing story. And thank you for sharing that. Solving a problem. That's a good reason to start a business, to see a problem and solve it. And that's an important, very important area that you're focused on. Thank you. We're gonna come back and learn more about your funding path next. But let's move on and hear from Fatma about.
Cheryl, you went mute.
Yep. Sorry about that. I want to hear about your story. Share with all of us how you got started, a little bit about your background and how you started your company and the purpose of your company. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting. Like Kate, I didn't actually start out, oh, I want to be entrepreneur versus it was, I was an academic, and during my postdoctoral work, I identified the first mate-finding pheromone from a model microscopic roundworm called C. elegans. But I knew I have a farming background. My grandparents are farmers, and the pest control makes a big difference in their harvest. And when I heard the project, it was pheromones and how effectively they're used for pest control. And I thought this project has a potential. So I accepted the position, and it was a very difficult project. It wasn't as easy as it looked from outside. At least my postdoc advisor claimed and presented to me. So he pitched it to me, I accepted it. It was very painstaking work, but we were successful. Then USDA hired me to apply this technology to agriculturally important nematodes. These are root knot nematodes, and they attack the plant root and reduce the yield, and the farmers, when they harvest, and all of a sudden they don't really have enough yield. So it's a bad surprise. And it was right about the time methyl bromide was removed, which is a colorless, odorless fumigant, and it had environmental effect, and it was phased out. And farmers really needed solutions, good solutions. They still do. This year, we had funding from NSF, and we talked to 100 customers in agriculture ecosystem, and they said, you know, we still have very limited tools. And it was a good thing to hear. Then, and I thought, well, I was at the USDA, I could actually maybe find a big corporate partner or someone from industry would be interested in developing. Nothing for 3 to 4 years. And I thought, well, who would actually be the best person to develop this technology other than me? And I know I'm the first one who identified it. And I know the topic, and I have personal interest because I grew up in a farming family. So that's how my journey started. With at Pheronym, we use pheromones to control agricultural pests. And it was a lot more different than I imagined. And so I learned a lot more about business. I should say, I had a question somebody asked, so what is it, how different is it from going academic to business world? I said it was kind of going into a different star system. It's like totally different world. What do? It's like you need money, you need mentorship, and things are very different. And I immediately realized that I really needed help for mentors, and I searched for mentorship programs, and I have benefited from them. So I think that's basically, I think I covered pretty much everything you asked, my journey and how I ended up here.
Great. That's a great story, from farmers to an academic to the USDA and now to an entrepreneur. What a wonderful story. And like Kate, congratulations for saying, I have the vision and I'm the right person to do this. That's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Okay, Anna, let's hear a little bit about the story of Sparck and how it came to be.
Yeah, so a bit different. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I was in the corporate world. I worked with executives for over 15 years on their talent retention, engagement, and attraction strategies. I always took on a role of that entrepreneur where I take on underperforming territories or building new territories to make them profitable. So it was something that was always in my blood. Throughout that time, what kind of sparked my curiosity is I saw this huge disconnect between how much money employers were spending to motivate and retain their top talent and how many people were still leaving because they didn't feel appreciated. And this disconnect is what really got my curiosity. So I spent about a year just kind of diving into the psychology of the workplace, looking at white papers, looking at the business trends, where the bottlenecks were within organizations. And what I found is that there's an art to recognition that's really never been taught. The physical reward itself for all the investment is going is only about half of the experience. But who and how that recognition is being delivered is really what makes it meaningful or not. So I started testing out this theory, and I actually met with the VP of sales from a Fortune 100 company in Silicon Valley. And I was kind of sharing this philosophy and testing out this idea. And he's just stopped and he's like, listen, this is a little painful to talk about right now because my top salesperson just got a $200,000 bonus at the end of the year, but was forgotten on the year-end presentation by the CEO and ended up leaving the company. And that's really what it came down to. Hearing that story and talking to others where I knew that we needed to start Sparck. And so right now, especially for the war for talent, you know, it goes beyond the perks, it goes beyond the dollars. It's really understanding how people tick, how they're motivated, equipping those managers. So I don't have a technical background as it relates to building technology. And so I found a co-founder, went down to Founders Institute in San Francisco to really flesh out the idea, test it out. We've been doing MVP. We were in beta all of last year, and then we fully launched our full solution with beta at the beginning of this year. So we are now just kind of building up those final levels in our foundation so we can really start to scale at the beginning of 2022.
Great. So that's a great story. So you had a hunch and then took it to the customer and fleshed it out and found partners and technical support along the way. But all three of you really have taken your vision and made it your full-time commitment. And that is something to applaud. Great. Now we'd like to dig into, you've also all gotten funding and resources to continue the journey. And so we'd really like to hear a little bit about your funding stories. And if it's already public how much you've raised, you can say that, or just give us a sense of what you've raised, and then talk a little bit about your learnings from that. What have you learned? Because that's the title of this panel is fundraising. What have you learned on your fundraising journey? And if you have any funny stories to share with us, we'd love that too. Start with Kate.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I have a funny story, but I'll come back to that. So what have I learned? Well, fundraising is an art more than a science. I'm a scientist, and I think I approached it very scientifically at first, and it was a very steep learning curve. I think, you know, it's similar to my Ph.D. program. What I learned was the most important thing are relationships when it comes to fundraising. And I was very fortunate to establish or meet Roger Akers locally here, and he was very instrumental in helping us fundraise. Built a relationship with Roger over a year before starting to fundraise. And then he was extremely instrumental in making those connections to the right people in order to do the fundraising. We did also look to raise outside of the Sacramento region, in which case there was another connector that we ended up establishing a relationship with to connect us to VCs around the nation, who we're still connected to, and they're very interested in talking to us further down the road. We were a little early for most of them, and so ended up keeping our seed round locally here in Sacramento. We raised $2 million, just closed the seed round on that about a few weeks ago, about a month ago. And I have a funny story. So here's my funny story. My very first pitch was to Dale Carlson, and it was terrible. It was awful. I did not have a pitch deck. I did not know what a pitch deck was. I just said, here's a problem I'm trying to solve with foster kids, and here's the solution that I'm building. And, you know, I just expected him to understand it. I didn't have anything about the market. I didn't have anything about the business model. I didn't have anything about anything. I had no idea what I was doing. I was trying to solve a problem. And that was how I started out. He did not invest in me, but I can't blame him. It was a terrible pitch, and I learned a lot since then. And I've got my pitch down now, you know, after a very steep learning curve. So my one thing I would say is, don't give up on yourself. You can learn, and even if someone else doesn't see it in you, it's there. It's a learning curve, and as you do many pitches, you'll learn from everyone, and they'll always get better. But your first is going to be terrible. Thank you.
All right. Well, I love this story, because we all have to learn, right? And being self-aware and having a sense of humor about the learning journey. And congratulations to you. You've obviously learned fairly rapidly and have been able to shape your solution into a business and investor proposition that's compelling. So congratulations. Fatma, would love for you to chime in a little bit about your fundraising success and stories.
So I am going to agree with Kate. The most important thing is the relationships for fundraising. And it is actually whether it's dilutive or non-dilutive. And I'm guessing Kate was meaning for the dilutive funding. Even for the non-dilutive funding, grant funding, it's the relationships are really important. Mine started actually in grad school. When I got into grad school, I realized, oh, without grant funding, and there's no faculty position. So one of the first thing I learned in grad school in my PhD, the first year, I got every opportunity to write a grant and to raise funds. So that came in really handy. I did really think I would be an entrepreneur and raising non-dilutive funds. My first funding was actually, I was applying for faculty position and I got grant funding, but not the faculty position. And we had a company at that time. It's an LLC predecessor of Pheronym. And with funding, we thought, okay, we got funding, we had a goal, maybe we should actually focus on the company. So we switched from looking for faculty position to the company. Then I realized, oh, this is really a new territory. I really don't know a whole lot. We got into a local incubator and to see how to raise funds. And like Kate, I had no idea how to prepare a pitch deck. What is a pitch deck? The question is, how do you prepare one? So they said they had mentors, and I wasn't really sure what I was getting into, but I said, okay, I can. I didn't even know how to utilize mentors at that time. But the incubator was really great, and they introduced us the pitch deck and the components of the pitch deck. And we prepared one. It was a little bit, I would say, it was very plain. So we have learned a lot more. So after that, through that incubator, I was in Florida and I was introduced to Indie Bio Accelerator. that was a life-changing event. And they said, well, you have to come to San Francisco for 4.5 months during the accelerator. When we got into San Francisco, it was like, wow, this is a totally different world. The ecosystem was amazing. And I immediately realized that if we were going to be successful, we had to be in this ecosystem. So we learned a lot more about pitch deck, and we became more sophisticated with the pitch deck. But with the biotech companies, the funds doesn't really come all that easy. So we decided to be very diverse, and we learned that women founders have a lot harder time to get funding. So we had two strategies. One was dilutive, the other one was non-dilutive. Because I was trained to raise funds with the non-dilutive funding, so that wasn't all that hard for me. So, but again, we had to do networking for that, and I got really great collaborators for the non-dilutive fund. But we also had to focus. Anything that we wrote non-dilutive was toward our product development goal. There, I met Pam Marone in California Life Science Institute because I knew I needed more mentorship, and that came in really handy. From there, I ended up in Davis, and I thought, I'm an ag company. San Francisco is not the headquarters of agriculture, but UC Davis and Davis area is. So we ended up here. We got into a really great ag network. Ag Start was one of them. Seed Central was one of them. We met many of the seed companies, and HM Klaus Incubator was really important for us to come here. And recently we raised fund from Sacramento Angels and other angels in the area. It's $242,000, and we were very happy, I would say. And that synergized with a non-dilutive entrepreneurial fellowship we got. It's called Activate Berkeley Fellowship. So they fund us for 2 years and give access to us Berkeley National Lab and to their fermenters and to scale up. At the same time, we got into accelerator. We also learned that accelerators were a really great way to expand your network. And Meet Growers and Thrive Ag accelerators provided us the growers network and how we can get in touch with them for the farm demos, because that's one part. And but once you have farm demos, how do you provide the product? And there is no commercial nematode pheromone production, so that was complemented with the Activate Fellowship. So we are very diverse. It's with respect to funding, and that is non-dilutive. They also have the mentorship programs. So I would say overall, this year was a good year.
Yes, well, thank you for sharing. Congratulations, and we're really glad to have you here in the Sacramento area. And we heard, I think, both from Kate and Fatma, it's about relationships. You had a relationship with Pam, it sounds like, that helped get you here, and going from there in terms of funding, and that's really amazing. And I also like the fact that you're describing the grant funding. I think one question I have for you, Fatma, with the grant funding, have you applied for the grants, or have you used specialized resources in terms of grant writing to get access to those funds?
I haven't used grant writers. Many people do. And we work on a very specific topic. One of the things we were very lucky is, and unlucky, I would say, investors want a little bit more less risky. And the academics like really cutting edge. We were on the very cutting edge, almost leading edge. So that provided us a huge advantage for the grant writing. But I did have cooperative research and development agreement where I had access to USDA farms, so they did field trials for us. So I didn't really use the commercial ones. But one thing I did, I had a really good training. The other thing is, it was a little pricey.
I think, okay, I missed a little bit.
Grant writers,
okay.
I thought the grant writing resources, they were a little pricey. I was a little bit more frugal, I think, at the beginning. So I used my own time instead of using other
Well, great.
resources.
So you,
But there are many resources. I write my own grants.
you write your own grants. That's impressive. And I know others who've been very successful doing that as well, especially when you have long product development times, such as in your sector. Really important. And it sounds like you've mastered that, as well as now moving over and mastering fundraising from investors who, as you said, have shorter time horizons and like to de-risk things, right? High returns and low risk is what you're after, it seems. Okay, well, so thank you. Anna, let's hear a little bit about your fundraising success and experience, and any interesting stories you have to share with the group tonight.
Yeah, so just to reiterate off of what's already been said is, the core of fundraising is really the relationships. That was a huge focus, even from starting the business and ensuring that I had those in place before knowing I was going to fundraise. So when you're looking at, or when I was looking at the relationships, I was looking at, mentors and advisors and sponsors, and sometimes they're both. So like just a quick definition of those on how they can really help with fundraising is those mentors and advisors are helping you get equipped and ready for the pitches and, your business plan and everything that you need to dial that in. But then the sponsors are actually putting their stamp on you and getting you in front of investors and saying, hey, this is someone that you need to meet. And that's really where the game changes. Roger Akers' name came up from Kate. I love Roger, and he's just so instrumental in the entrepreneurial community. And so having people like that just helping you open doors is so instrumental. And I can say, the success that Sparck has had up to this point is not our own. It's truly the people that have surrounded themselves around us and invested their time. And so other ways that we've done this is, like you guys were just talking about, is there's a lot of risk that comes with these pre-seed and seed stage raises, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur. So investors are coming in and saying, okay, how risky is this? So a lot of times I was thinking, how do I help alleviate this risk or make the investor more confident in the decision? Because really at this stage, you don't have a ton of traction. So they're really right now investing in you as a person, your co-founder, your team, and what your business plan is. So I spent a lot of time professionally stalking advisors for Sparck. And so I wanted people that had reputable backgrounds within my space that could really, what I call Swiss cheese, where they just poke holes in everything that we're doing. And I knew that if I could get that past experts in the field, I could certainly get past any investor that came my way. So I wanted to be ready. So we have Robert Richmond. He was the culture strategist at Zappos. We have an IO psychologist on our board. We have Intel. We have an AI specialist because we do have AI within our platform from IBM. And so just surrounding myself by people that were better and stronger than me positioned me to have that confidence and be equipped for a lot of these investor conversations. Also through accelerators, that was extremely helpful. So, or any sort of pitch contest where I'd say, hey, we got first place in this pitch contest, or, the Women in Tech Fellowship Award, like anything that could build certain credibility really helped, I think, open up more doors. I'll say that I was extremely naive. I thought because I had a sales background and had been successful in that role that I would kill it in fundraising. I was horrible. I absolutely sucked. I mean, just to put it out there, the investors, every pitch I had initially, unless they knew me personally, I was not getting investment dollars. And I mentioned this earlier through FourthWave is I would leave these investor meetings and people that had an HR background were like, hey, we need your product for our company. This is perfect. But not one investor said, yes, this is a great investment. for us. So just really kind of learning your target audience, how to position your company as an investment opportunity and not just a passion. I came at my pitches with passion, with my research, with my story, but that didn't resonate with the investor community. And once, you know, a lot of my mentors like Ken Talos started working with me and having me pitch, going through the accelerator where they would actually rate you on a scale of 1 to 5, and you'd be kicked out of the program if you were under a 3. So just constantly like kind of in that, you know, rice cooker or whatever, just mastering the game and getting prepared. So it was a longer learning curve than I anticipated. And I still feel like I'm learning and growing. And it's like you get past the seed stage and now you need to start preparing for Series A in the next 12 to 18 months. And that's a whole different ballgame. So it's just really that preparation, the relationships, and being open to learning that I found.
All right. Well, so what we heard from everyone, we've heard relationships, we've heard learning. Like, I think you all said you sucked at the beginning and you got better and better and better. And I think you all have a passion for what you're doing and for the solution that you're providing. And so I think those are really consistent, you know, 3 good checkpoints for any entrepreneur who's going to go out and fundraise. Now, since we are a female panel, I am going to raise, since relationship is so important and your network is so important, one of the things that the Kauffman Foundation has done studies on, you know, female entrepreneurs, and they found that there's a lack of access to mentorship, which are those relationships that all of you just articulated, that were the key to get you to the, you know, to your successful funding events now. And they lack access to capital. So they kind of go hand in hand, right? I would love to hear your advice to other women who are maybe where you were sitting a few years ago, without, maybe with your passion and your idea and your vision, but without maybe without the right relationship or knowing where to go. I'd like you each to go through and what's your best advice for someone, yourself or someone like you, in that position now. And I will say one other very positive thing that is happening. We are seeing a lot of new small venture funds coming to, you know, that have been funded to do seed and early stage investing led by women. I talk to dozens of new ones every week. So there is that coming, but on an optimistic side. But Kate, love to hear, what's your best advice to the women in our audience who may be like you were at the beginning?
Yeah, so you know, I think it is tough because there's not a lot of people that look like me in being women, you know, that in the ecosystem, right, that have reached that success level of giving back. There, you know, most of the folks that I connected with in the Sacramento region were male, but they were extremely helpful. So there's no bad thing about that. But I do hope that females will step up and become part of the ecosystem. And I really appreciate what FourthWave is doing. I think it's so important. And I went to one of your events, your little minglers, just prior to the pandemic, but didn't get a chance to really engage in the FourthWave ecosystem, which is a bummer. And I would say that, you know, most of the folks that I engaged with or found for mentorship, you know, were men, which was fabulous, but it would have been nice to have had a female mentor as well, and didn't find that till recently. We did add Jonna Ward to our board, who's a local female entrepreneur who is now getting to the point in her career where she's ready to get, or has the time, I shouldn't say ready, because I'm sure she's been always ready, but has the time to give back. And so that's been wonderful. but I wish there were more. And so FourthWave, hopefully you'll build the ecosystem of women, successful women entrepreneurs in the angel investing world, and then there'll be more mentors, female mentors. The other thing, the advice that I would give is stick to your guns. And unfortunately, there is a lot of pressure to step down as a female. I've gotten a lot of pressure that I can't do it, that I would have to find, a male, CEO to take it, somebody with business experience, somebody with an MBA, but it has to be it's your vision. There isn't a business person that's going to step in and carry out your vision. And so my advice is that you will get I think every entrepreneur gets the same pressure, male or female. And I'm not sure if it's more for females because I've never done it as a male, but you will get pressure as a newbie to give the reins to somebody else for your company because you've never been a CEO. And you know what? CEOs don't start companies because they're too comfortable. There is not a single entrepreneur that starts a company who was a former CEO. We're all hungry. We're all innovative. We all have a vision. And so all that pressure you get that you can't do it and that you need to hand the reins to somebody else who has an MBA or who has been a CEO before, not in the beginning. It's your vision. So my advice is stick to your guns and just don't listen to the naysayers and push forth. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that. Stick to your guns. Don't listen to the naysayers. You can do it. And I can tell you that the vision is the most important thing. And you co-creating the world you want to see with your vision. And so, yes, do not step aside, but learn from those who have experience that can help you realize your vision. Yay, good for you. Fatma, what advice might you give to your younger self or some of the women in the audience who are just starting out?
I'm going to say stick to your gun because you have the vision and focus on the positive. When people say, oh, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Your strengths are going to get you somewhere. Focus on your strength. You don't have to be perfect, but those strengths. And once when you push for it, then, if there are weaknesses, you can find somebody. You can find a good co-founder. And because entrepreneurship, running a company is not a single person job. You need a lot of really good people. And once you focus on your strength and you find people who have good strengths and you can attract them. And like Kate said, believe in yourself. And there will be people, who are going to suggest you, hey, you would be a great CSO or something else that, that maybe somebody else should be CEO. Maybe there's a time for it, but at very early stage, at least what I think for Pheronym, right now I'm the right CEO. I can grow into it, and it is all up to us. And we're going to learn, and none of the companies, every company is very different. The way they grow is very different. Even the experienced CEO will have a very different learning experience with our company because it's different. They're all very unique. And the other really, really important one is have really great positive advisors who will champion you, who will believe in you, and will support you. I found that really, really important. And I must say, Pam was one of those champions and really great mentor. And she's a mentor that she believes in women, and we can do great things. So I would say, stick to your guns and have really good, positive people and who supports you, believe in your vision. And that would be it.
So I love the positive. Surround yourself with positive people, and then have that positive vision yourself, and that positive self-talk as you build your business, as you build your relationships, as you build talk with your your funding sources, your investors, right? That is something we really do focus on quite a bit with FourthWave. So I totally think that is very, very important. That whole attitude and the types of people that we surround ourselves with as we grow. And I think there was an interesting, you probably saw, there was a woman who recently raised quite a bit of money to do her company, and she was pregnant with twins, and was, politely suggested by some investors that perhaps she should step aside and so she quickly rolled out those investors who were investing in her company. And so I think you two kind of echo her spirit, and I think that's important, because you want to get to know who the investors are, and you want them to be supportive of you and your vision, and not saying, well, maybe you should step aside. So thank you for that. Anna, would love to hear your advice to your younger self or some of the women on the call as to what you might do differently, or what you did that really you feel was the right thing to do at that time.
Yeah, well, actually, just to echo what you were just saying about identifying and finding the right investors for your business, it goes beyond the money. And it's really the people that believe in what you're doing, believe in you. That's how your business is going to scale. And I think that's been so instrumental for us. All the advisors that have come on, or excuse me, investors, they're either clients now, they're introducing me to other investors, or they're introducing me to other clients. So it's been a huge revenue and growth channel for Sparck. And just aligning with people that have similar values and get what you're doing. There's so many times I was pitching to investors who didn't know my space, and I spent more time talking about the problem and trying to prove that my product would work versus the actual financial opportunity of investing in it. And so that was a huge part of it. The other thing that a piece of advice you were talking about, finding the right mentors, and how do you really do that? And, I've been very grateful to have so many amazing male mentors and sponsors in my life, and now women through FourthWave. That's completely expedited my community and network, and just having Janine working with me. And one of the best things that I can say, and advice I'd give to myself, is be so specific with who you're looking for. So if you say, I really need a great mentor, it just kind of goes out into the universe. Or if you tell other people that, it's really hard for them to pinpoint who that may be for you. So don't be afraid to ask. So when I was looking for an IO psychologist to be on our advisory board, I reached out to some of my network and I said, listen, I'm looking for an IO psychologist that has experience with X, Y, and Z. Here's like my ideal person. And basically, it was like the law of attraction. Everything that I had in my email, all of a sudden she appeared, and she's been so instrumental for Sparck. I'd also say, don't be afraid to reach out. I mentioned Robert Richmond. He wrote the book, Culture Blueprint, and he was someone that I just had up on a pedestal, and I just connected with him on LinkedIn. And ended up flying down to San Diego for 15 minutes of his time. And I had to spark him to get him to be an advisor to really understand what this meant. And so it's just, you have to take the fear out of it. Your passion is what fuels your grit. And you need a lot of grit as you're going through and building your company.
That's a great story. Yeah. Going down and identifying the mentor, and being very, very specific about what type of mentor you're looking for, and then talk to people about that. Reach out to your network as specific as you can. Find the people on LinkedIn who meet that criteria, and see if you can find introductions. And that will work. And you all mentioned accelerator programs. We talked about FourthWave. There are other great accelerator programs here in Sacramento and in Northern California. Are another great way of expanding your network, getting your ideas, meeting mentors. I know the Carlson Center has a number of great programs with access to mentors. Sacramento has started a mentorship I think, database even that the Carlson Center is part of. So you can reach out to them to access mentors in the region, look at, I think people put their profiles online, so you can go through those profiles. So there are those resources, and Anna's advice of being very specific and reaching out and talking to people about what you're looking for will get you connected to your Roger Akers or your Pam Marone, and get you on the way to where these amazing women are today. Do we have any time for questions, Jeff, or?
Yeah, I think let's take 10 or
Okay.
just 10 or so minutes and field a few questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sounds
Any
good.
questions? And if you have a question, either throw it in the chat, and Lorik is doing an excellent job in the chat monitoring that, or just unmute yourself and ask away. Any questions?
I have a question. You all kind of mentioned multiple accelerators or different processes you went through. Along that journey, is there a point to which you said, okay, it's time to stop looking for those kind of structures and it's time to just kind of focus here? And kind of what was the trigger for you on that? And if you were doing it again, would you do more than one accelerator along the way?
I'll just start because I was usually starting, but I did not do any accelerators. So I'll pass the baton on to those who did.
Yeah, so the accelerators that we did that were really helpful was First Founders Institute, that really helped build kind of the foundational pieces of, how do you start a company, fleshing out the ideas. But then FourthWave is where it was extremely instrumental to help scale the business. It's interesting because we had an investor come to us after we graduated who wanted us to go through their accelerator program and give a $500,000 investment. And at this time, we are now so equipped to scale and have the right resources and our technologies out, where right now I know and our team knows that we just really want to invest our time in our go-to-market strategy and getting our business growth, where we really got what we needed from those two accelerators. And maybe that'll change down the road, but it was really helping for those first two milestones. First, building the foundation. Second, scaling in the leadership.
I must say I really did benefit from the accelerator. It also depends, it's a little bit financial decision too, because some accelerators take equity, and our first one was in the bio. For us, the money was the right amount, and we also had a non-dilutive fund, so we were able to synergize it. And it also provided a really great network, which we are still utilizing. And whenever we go to San Francisco, we have a office space because they have shared office spaces. We can go there and have a meeting with an investor. Or they have social events that they invite, there maybe several times a year, or they have demo day twice a year. We go and rekindle relationships and talk to people in person, because that's a very big difference, seeing people in person. Yes, in the past year or so, it is a little bit more difficult, but it helped us out, and they still support us. We learned a lot about marketing, I would say. It was a social media marketing and how important it was, the visibility, even though we were really working hard, but when you don't mention about it, nobody knows. You're kind of in your own, corner, and you're not really interacting. And we learned a lot about science communication too, because in my case, we're really heavy duty biotech, and how to communicate science. And sometimes when you're a PhD, you kind of go into the weeds and very specific, and people kind of look at you. We learned that, how to communicate with, everyone, and reduce it down to a level that we can actually talk to everyone and get that message out. We met our marketing advisor there. That was very helpful to get our message, what we were doing, in a simple word. From there, we had mentorship programs that didn't take any equity. So depending on the equity versus to expand your network, that was FAST program, Fellows of All-Star Team by California Life Science Institute. We actually got a different kind of relationship there that is a lot more bonds you with your mentors versus with IndieBio. We had a lot more bonding with our peers, which still help us out. Like you mentioned with FourthWave, when you need help and you ask a question and all of a sudden you have all these answers and many of your peers tell you about. And that is still helpful because anytime we have a question, we can get an answer immediately. For example, CRM, it was maybe 6 months ago, we were looking for a CRM and all of a sudden we have 3 or 4 and they were using what they liked, what they didn't like. And now we had an answer within an hour. So the second accelerator we have is Thrive Ag. And again, it goes back to the financial because they don't really actually, when you're early stage, it's a little bit more equity than how much equity you want to give up before you actually raise a lot of, when you need a lot more money. That one gave us a different network because we needed the growers and that is providing that particular network. So different ones have different network that you need during your growth. So for a while, we didn't get into accelerator. The mentorship programs worked for us, but we got to a point last year that we really wanted to have a relationship with growers. That was the Thrive Ag that got us.
Well, there you have it. You have 2 that used accelerators, and then we have Kate who did it. So there's without accelerators, so there's a variety of paths. I think you just, research some of the accelerators and see if one's a good fit for you. And, utilize some of the local ecosystem resources. I know Cameron and team at the Carlson Center have a lot of those that you can access as well. Any more questions, Jeff?
I think we have time for one last question. Anybody have a question? Please unmute yourself or put it into chat or raise your Zoom hand. Nobody?
Well, if nobody else has one, I have another one. When you're talking about your seed raise, there's been a lot in the media and startup Twitter and just kind of general talk about how crazy fundraising has been and how different that's looked, and $500 million Series A announced today, and just madness. Did you see that in your experience, and how kind of isolated is that to repeat founders and as female first-time founders raising your seed? Did you see a different environment now than what you were hearing about a year or 2 ago?
So I guess to start, I was pitching before the pandemic in person, and it was definitely a different atmosphere prior to the pandemic, I'd say, than it is now. So I don't know if that's just changed over time or it has something to do with the pandemic. But prior to the pandemic, it was really tough. Honestly, it was really tough to get any traction. Now I've grown a lot since then, so there's a combination of changes and factors that could have played a role. But fundraising for me has been a lot easier now, and it could be the space that I'm in, mental health, because there's a huge spotlight on mental health now. Prior to the pandemic, when I was pitching for mental health, especially over in the Bay Area, I mean, I just got glazed eyes. And isn't mental health, isn't that something you take blood for and diagnose, and give them a pill? Like, what? It was, and now, for me, being mental health, being in the news so much and being a focus and the isolation that folks are feeling, there's a lot more money going toward mental health. I'd also say that it's amazing how many of the VC firms that I got in contact with were all female. And so when I talked to VC firms, that every person I talked to there was a female, there was just this, even if they didn't invest, it was just a encouragement. And I didn't see that prior to the pandemic. I don't know if there's more females in the field now in the VC firms than there was then, or I just got connected but I definitely felt like there was this shift for me pre to post pandemic in terms of just hitting a lot of brick walls and a lot of blank stares. And then even if folks weren't investing, they were encouraging. So that's my experience.
Yeah, I actually started raising January of last year. So right before the pandemic hit. So I had to shut my round down and then just kind of hold tight to see how things transpired, and then started raising again towards the end of last year. So that has really only been my experience. But for me, I think it's been really positive. This virtual environment gives you a lot more access to people. You can be more effective with your time. The only thing that was difficult for me is I love being in person. And like, that's how I can read a room and really connect with someone. So kind of learning how to do that on Zoom is still a learning curve for me. And my office looks completely different. I have a desk that can elevate so I can stand up when I'm doing my pitches. So I have more energy. I have my, lighting over here and my microphone. It's like, okay, if you're going to raise $1 million, you got to look like $1 million, and just like kind of getting your setup together. But yeah, nonetheless, like there's this like human connection. I think a value for human connection that came out of the pandemic, where I feel like a lot of people were a lot more gracious. They're hearing your dog in the background, or my daughter or my son. And it's just like, it brought the human side out within the fundraising process that I think for me, it was just a great experience across the board.
I think fundraising for me wasn't really on and off, but I think it's always continuously, you network and it's part of it. One thing we did do that was different compared to previous years is during pandemic, we got into National Science Foundation I-Corps program, where when we did the customer discovery interviews, we discovered a lot of things. And we learned what the farmers were looking for. And we thought, oh, you know what? We should probably do the same thing with the investors. So I reached out to Pam, our advisor. Can you make some introductions? And when the investors reached out to us due to our social media posts and some of the milestones we had, then we said, well, can we have an interview as an introduction rather than, fundraising versus we would like to ask, what you're looking for. Our next round, we expect it to be Series A. What kind of business and technical milestones are you looking for? Then we try to guide, we have product development goals, but at the same time, what are the ones overlapping, and let's prioritize those and get ready for next year. And so we thought how long it would take for us to get there. But this year, I wasn't really sure, but it just happened. It is years of network here. But pre-pandemic, right at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was worried because it was such a financial instability. And then it goes back to the accelerator. Our accelerator in the bio had every other week meeting and helping us to get through. We were not in accelerator anymore. As an alumni, they had a huge support. And we were guiding it basically maybe 1 month at a time and trying to gauge in what would happen. But this year we thought, okay, it seems like pandemic is going to be over. And the fundraising, again, we had multiple sources, and this year everything paid off. I think it's both a building relationship and you never stop fundraising.
All right. Well, thank you, all the panelists, for participating tonight. You all are awesome, and we're going to look forward to watching your rapid growth of your companies here in the Sacramento region.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all, and I also want to echo that. Thank you to Cheryl for leading this, and Nancy and Jesse and Sarah and Amy and Anna and Kate and Fatma. Thank you all. This is if you've seen the comments in the chat, we've had some rave comments in here just raving about what's been in this. So thank you again for showing up here. We really appreciate it.